And the fact that something as straight as conservative Time magazine recognized the value of Bob Marley's work in the 20th century, um, that was an important moment, and that brought many new people to Bob.
What about the popularity of reggae music? Is the popularity of reggae music rising alongside the popularity of Bob Marley?
Nah, reggae's dead. Dancehall killed reggae.
So, what was reggae's peak, in your opinion, in terms of popularity?
Mid 80s.
Mid 80s?
Yeah. Black Uhuru, Gregory Isaacs, Dennis Brown, Burning Spear, Culture, all making great music, and finally getting enough stations, mostly college, in America, all across the country, to play that music. And I think in maybe 83 to about 87, Los Angeles was the biggest reggae city on earth.
Mhm.
We didn't go more than a week without having one, sometimes two or three artists, name artists from Jamaica, performing here in Los Angeles. We had three reggae clubs. Um, and I was doing the Reggae Beat show at that time, and we had almost every major name in the music on the show. And we were on commercial free 4 hours every Sunday afternoon. And very often the artists would perform live in our studios. And we had so many special moments. It was a combination of a graduate seminar and Rastafarian service, groundation. Every Sunday afternoon, my partner Hank Holmes had about 8,000 Jamaican records, really knew the history. I've been on the radio since 1961. My first guest back in 61 on a commercial station, WVOX in New York, was Olatunji, the Nigerian drummer. You know, Babatunde Olatunji,
Yeah.
drums of passion. So I've always been into ethnic music, African music since probably 1959, Miriam Makeba, people like that. And I'm the guy who turned Paul Simon on to Ladysmith Black Mambazo
Oh, really?
for the Graceland album. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. This is a side tangent, but I'm going to go here. I heard a rumor, an unconfirmed rumor, that before Paul Simon made Graceland, that he was flirting with the idea of doing a Scotalites like ska record. Do you know anything about
Never,
this? Never heard
never
about it?
heard that.
Okay.
No. No. When he changed labels, in '83, when he went to Universal after all those years on Columbia, the president of the label called me up because I was doing an African music show at the time too with Tom Schnabel called Morning Goes Makossa. And he said he had just signed Paul Simon, and Paul was interested in doing something in Africa. And could I send him some of the music that I thought he should listen to? And one of our listeners was a South African film director who lived at Venice Beach, and he was going home for a while. And he said, "Give me some money, and I'll bring you back some records." And he brought me back several records, including a beautiful Ladysmith Black Mambazo album with all 12 members in a tree, and Joseph Shabalala, the lead singer, at the base of the tree. And that's the album that I sent to Paul, along with a copy of Rhythm of Resistance, which is just an amazing album of South African music. And he fell in love with Ladysmith, and 2 years later he went to South Africa and found him for the record.
Bob Marley. So there's a few figures in the 20th, 21st century that I feel like have sort of ascended rock star status to like an almost deity status. I feel like Jerry Garcia, John Lennon, some of these people, but Bob Marley is definitely one of those people where I feel like almost gets viewed like not like almost like he's not even a human, like he's this kind of like god-like figure.
Well, the one closest to that and sainthood is Bob Marley.
So what is your opinion on it? Does that like you had spent time with him when he was still alive? Do you feel like this is a good representation of him, or does it feel like we're taking him out of context?
Let's take one fact for an example. They say he made about $30 million while he was alive. He gave away almost all that money.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't even have a real bed until about 18 months before he died. He slept on a cot in the attic of Tuffgong until some women in his life got together and bought him a real bed. He had lines from the front door of Tuffgong through the yard all the way out into the street whenever he was home from people begging him money. His business manager, Colin Leslie, is one of my dearest friends, and he had to co-sign the checks or they weren't valid. So he knows how Bob spent the money. And he told me a story once about a guy who came and he said he wanted to start a coconut oil business. And Bob wrote him a big check right away. And when he left, Colin said, why'd you do that, Bob? And Bob says, oh, Colin, I've always wanted to be in the oil business. But he would help a farmer whose tractor broke and he couldn't bring his crops in, and he'd buy him a tractor. You know, if you came in with any legitimate reason, he would write you a check. And a lot of people depended on Bob every month for a payment that would let them live in their home. These are things that go unremarked, but tell you what kind of a person Bob truly was. One of the most generous people who ever lived. He didn't live for himself. He lived for others. If he can't do something to make his people more independent, then what good is his work? He was selfless. Selfless.
In your research, was he always like this, or did he have a turning point in his life that steered him in this direction?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think once he had the money, he had to think of what to do with it. And right from the start, he was helping people. Yeah, so I mean, he didn't think about it because he didn't have any money until probably around 75. First real money he made was writing songs for Johnny Nash when they were both on the Jad record label, Johnny, Arthur, and Danny. Incidentally, there's a movie in the works for 20 years, I've been advising, that tells the story of that 5-year fecund period when Bob Marley was a Jad record artist. And Danny Sims was trying to break him on Black American radio stations, but his songs sounded so odd in this time of psychedelic rock that they couldn't get any airplay for him at all in America. But Johnny covered him. Johnny covered, more than a dozen Bob Marley songs and made beautiful versions of it. In fact, his version of reggae on Broadway is much better than Bob's. I wanna dance. I wanna make romance. I wanna dance, baby. I wanna make romance. That was the single they released on CBS in 1972 in England when he was briefly a CBS artist. And then Danny Sims sold the contract again to Chris Blackwell, and Chris put Bob on the map.
Johnny Nash, some of his music kind of goes unnoticed, that it's either reggae or reggae influenced.
Oh, very reggae influenced.
But it sort of kind of it kind of just was sort of categorized as American soul music, but it was extremely like...
Right. Nobody ever used the word reggae to describe it. First time I ever heard it. I've been into music really deeply since I grew up on Alan Freed in New York City. And I had never heard the word reggae till that article in Rolling Stone in June of 73. Yeah, but Johnny was making reggae-sounding records, if you knew what reggae was in those days. And, he should be congratulated for his role in trying to break reggae in America.
I can't really think of another artist of that era, American artist of that era, that was so that was playing reggae to that degree and was getting airplay. Like he kind of stands on his own a bit in that.
Yeah, absolutely right.
But the interesting thing is, like you were saying, is like him and Bob Marley had a relationship. So Bob is part of the story of Johnny Nash and Johnny Nash.
Yeah. Oh, without question. I mean, from the Groundation in January of 1978 when they met him, and Bob loved Johnny's music. He said he sang like a bird.